Good day everyone, I'm Masi Anda from Group 1 and I'm here to discuss to you the description of English of the 5 countries in the inner circle of Cockroach concentric circles of English. Papa stated that the inner circle consists of the countries that are considered as traditional races of English and in charge of providing the norms. These countries are where the norms are created and from which they spread to the other countries.
The invasions and migrations have played a large role in development of dialects and accents in the United Kingdom. Germanic tribes from the northwest of Europe began to settle on the island in the 5th century. The settlers were made up of 3 ethnic groups: Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. Over time, these different settlement patterns resulted in the emergence of different Old English dialects, which again gave rise to a different accents of British English we know today. In the United Kingdom today, there are approximately 40 unique dialects. They employ a variety of spellings and word constructions. And there are numerous local words. You've probably heard of dialects like Cockney from London, Glaswegian from Glasgow, Scouse from Liverpool, and Geordie from Newcastle, all of which might be difficult to understand if you encounter someone who speaks it extensively. Other dialects such as Brummie from Birmingham and Estuary English from Southeast are easier to understand but have distinct traits of grammatical features in British English. According to British Council 2015, aside from spelling and vocabulary, there are some differences in grammar between British and American English. Example, the band is playing. Collective nouns, on the other hand, can be singular or plural in British English, though the plural form is more commonly used. Example, the band are playing. The British also prefer formal speech such as shall, whereas Americans prefer the more informal will or should. British English, for example, I shall go to the mall to buy some food, while in American English, it will be I will go to the mall to buy some food. The word needn't, which is common in British English, is rarely, if ever, used in American English. It has been replaced by don't need to. For example, you needn't buy any more chips because I have plenty in my house. American English, for example, you need to buy chips because I have plenty in my house. Lexical features in British English. Double consonants. Sometimes, such as in the past participle of certain verbs, British spelling requires a doubled consonant, whereas American spelling does not. In other cases, the doubled consonant is used in US English, such as certain verbal infinitives or to preserve the root word of certain adjectives. Example, apple or apple, carburetor or carburetor, counselor or counselor.
The UK is incredibly diverse in terms of accents, and it just so happens that I can do many of these accents as my party trick. So come with me as I take you on a guided tour through all of the accents and archetypes of Great Britain. Hi, I'm Siobhan Thompson, and this is Anglophenia. And what I'm speaking right now is RP, received pronunciation, or your standard BBC English. It's spoken across the country, generally by middle, and upper class people. Think of Martin Freeman, Benedict Cumberbatch, or, most of the presenters of BBC News. So, good evening, it's 9 o'clock and this is the news, I'm very important. Heightened RP is generally only spoken on film and television now. So you're going to think of Nell Card or the Dowager Countess in Downton Abbey. Oh, Gerald, I do love you, but you're so terribly, terribly poor. Now, London is the accent that most people outside of Britain can recognise. That classic lock, stock and 2 smoking barrels. Get out of my pub! Go on, get out of it! Shut it, you tart! East Anglia is a flat, boggy kind of place with a flat, boggy kind of accent. I love to give you an example of somebody that comes from there that speaks like this, but they all lose this accent as soon as they can. Stephen Fry's from Norfolk, but he doesn't speak like this because he's posh. Here's a kind of classic kind of East Anglia phrase. I done dropped my computer in the fan and it's broken. Now let's go across the island to the West Country, which is a much rounder sound. It's farmland full of sheep and cows and apples. Think of like Sam Gamgee from The Lord of the Rings or Hagrid from the Harry Potter movies. Oh, you bloody kids, get off my land! Or, oh, Mr. Frodo, don't let him turn me into anything unnatural. And then when you go down to Cornwall, it gets a little bit more piratey. So, hoist the mizzenmast, Squire Trelawney. Now, Southern Welsh is this great sing-songy kind of an accent. Think of Tom Jones or Richard Burton. You know, rage against the dying of the light. Bloody hell, I love Dylan Thomas. Northern Welsh is where the singer Duffy is from. It's a breathier, thicker kind of an accent, and most people from there speak Welsh at home and English is a second language. So, you know, diolch yn fawr. Now across the country to the West Midlands and Birmingham, it's a very nasal kind of an accent, mostly on account of all the industry that went on in that area. Cat Daly, who presents So You Think You Can Dance, is from there, and so is Ozzy Osbourne, you know. Sharon, where's the bloody remote? Yeah, that voice that he does isn't because of drugs, it's just where he's from. Scouse is your classic Liverpool accent. The Beatles are from there, and so's Paul McGann. They were also made European Capital of Culture a couple of years ago by the EU, so don't tell me that I've cultured, alright? Up into Lancashire, and you know, think of Christopher Eccleston or most of the cast of the Downstairs in Downton Abbey. Daisy, get those buns out the oven before they burn. Oh, Mr. Bates. So, across the Pennines to Yorkshire, it's a much kind of flatter accent from Lancashire, and they cut off a lot of the words. So I'm going to Pub Up Hill. Think of Sean Bean from Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones. One does not simply walk into Mordor. So in Northumberland and Newcastle, he's speaking a Geordie accent. So, you know, think of the Geordie Shore or Carol Cole. Remember, she got fired from the X Factor because nobody could understand a word she was saying. Or Billy Elliot. All I want to do is dance bally, but me dad makes me box. Edinburgh's the capital of Scotland. It's a very soft, maybe a little snooty kind of an accent. Think of Ewan McGregor or Dame Maggie Smith as Professor McGonagall. That's 10 points taken from Gryffindor, Mr. Potter. Glasgow is a much thicker kind of an accent. Billy Connolly and Peter Capaldi are both from there. They cut off a lot of the words, so I haven't any butter, so I've got to go to the shop, you know. And so up to the very north to the Highlands of Scotland. Think of Amy Pond from Doctor Who, or maybe Sir Robert Burns. The best laid plans of mice and men, gang after glee. Now let's go to Northern Ireland, and it's all about the vowels with the Northern Irish accent, like how now, brown cow. Liam Neeson is from there. I've got a very particular set of skills. I know he doesn't say it in that accent in the movie, but it sounds well cool, so, And finally, Southern Ireland is obviously not a part of the United Kingdom, but I can do a Dublin accent, so let's just do it. It's a pretty classic Irish accent with a lot of assonance to it. So Sinead O'Connor's from there. Nothing compares to you. That is all from me. Tell me if there's any British accents that I missed, because I love a chat.
Ends versus ends. Many nouns ending in ENCE in British English and in ENSE in American English. In the United Kingdom, ENSE is only used for corresponding verbs. For example, you can license someone to do something, after which they will have a license to do it. For example is defense, license, offense. Unfortunately, we were not able to find any syntactic feature in British English. According to Richard W. Bailey, in Speaking American 2012, American English refers to the several kinds of English spoken in the United States. The first significant variant of English to emerge outside of Britain was American English. Strivens, 1972, stated that English was brought to America by colonists in the 17th century, and it quickly established its uniformity and standardization through numerous linguistic processes. With its pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammar, a multitude of elements including linguistic, geographic, socio-economic, and political considerations have contributed to the fast expansion of development of American English during the last 400 years. Grammatical features in American English. Here are some distinctly American English grammar rules according to English Language and Culture blog. In American English grammar, collective nouns are singular. With collective nouns, American English nearly generally utilizes singular subject-verb agreement. For example, the staff is taking the day off. The committee is making the decision today. Americans are less likely to use the present perfect tense. In American English grammar, talking about the past is straightforward. When describing recent finished activities, most Americans use the simple past tense. For example, he ate his lunch. I went to the store. Lexical features of American English. The lexical, syntactical, spelling, and pronunciation differences between American British 2013 explains that the necessity to label new characteristics of the New World's geography, flora, and fauna had an early role in the development of American English. The development of American English, the extensive but sometimes difficult for English speakers lexicon of Native Americans was one source for such terms. Captain John Smith, 1608, in trying to transcribe the Algonquian word meaning he scratches with his hands a raccoon, wrote Rahugkun. This is the source of our now familiar word raccoon. Other words derived from Native American languages include caucus, possibly from Algonquin kaukusu kosu, used in Captain John Smith, who spelled it kaukwasug, hickory, or pohickory, hominy, moccasin, moose, muskrat, opossum, papoose, pecan, persimmon, pone, powo, skunk, squash, squaw, sakotash, narangset, terrapin, toboggan, tomahawk, totem, wigwam, and woodchuck. Synthetic features in American English. The lexical, syntactical, spelling, and pronunciation differences between American and British 2013 stated that the distinctions between American and British English grammar and syntax are minor but noticeable. The only two small variations are the word dive and the sentence do have. The term dive is used by Americans as is the phrase do have in British English. The form dove is used for the form dive. Another grammatical distinction concerns the pronoun one. If one loses one's temper, one should apologize. An American might say using the third person pronoun for one, whereas an Englishman would say if one loses one's temper, one should apologize. As a result of Englishmen will always use the pronoun one.
Hi everyone, this is Jennifer from Tarl Speech and Language with your pronunciation question. Today's question is, how do I pronounce the word what? And the word what is spelled W-H-A-T. To say this word correctly, think of only 3 sounds. We have a silent letter in this situation. The H is not pronounced. So the word is pronounced W, short U, and T. So yeah, we don't pronounce this letter as an A, we pronounce it as a short U. So the word will be pronounced what. So you can see that vowel is very closed. So to say this word correctly, start by puckering your lips for the W sound. Add the short by only opening your lips slightly and making that sound very, very short. And then end with a T by touching the tip of your tongue to the back of your top front teeth. What? Let's give it a try. What? 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 What do you think? This is pretty easy, right?
Next, Conrad and Wilson describes Australian English as the country's official language and one of the major dialects of the English language. This language is a cross between British and American English, but it has its own distinct characteristics. Their use of English with an Australian accent will be noticeable in their pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammatical features. When Britain invaded Australia in the 18th century, the first generation of native-born colonies in the colony of New South Wales spoke the earliest Australian English. The British brought primaries to Australia. That's how their various accents arrived in Australia and merged merged into one. The story of our language from 1788 to the present day is actually the story of the nation. Describe the current situation in Australian English, in which there are different types of accents. Grammatical features in Australian English. According to the article entitled Everything Explained Today, English grammar describes the general rules of English grammar that apply to Australian English. Also, the grammatical differences between varieties of English are minor in comparison to differences in phonology and vocabulary, and they have no effect on intelligibility in general. Here are some examples of grammatical differences between Australian English and other varieties. Similar to British English, Australian English has an irregular past tense and past participles of verbs. For example, spell and smell become spelt and smelled. Since then, there have been several Australian English dictionaries that take a descriptive approach. As a result, Australian spelling is much closer to British spelling than American spelling. For example, the U is retained in words like color, and the ISE ending is used instead of the Americanized IZE suffix on words like realize and realize. Next, lexical features in Australian English. According to the encyclopedia, the major features of Aussie pronunciation are: first, it is non-rhotic. Second, its intonation is flatter than that of RP. Third, speech rhythms are slow, stress being more evenly spaced than in RP. Fourth, consonants do not differ significantly from those in RP. Fifth, vowels are in general closer and more frontal than in RP, with E and U as in T, to diphthongize to ea and ow, respectively. Sixth, the vowel in cantons may be or a. Seventh, the schwa is busier than in RP, frequently replacing E in non-accented positions as in boxes, dances, darkes, velvet, acid. 8. Some diphthongs shift RP A towards I as in Australia, they, made, and I towards oi as in high, wide. 9. Speakers whose first language is not English or who have a bilingual background often use sounds and a delivery influenced by the patterns of the first or other language. 10. The name of the letter H is often pronounced as H by speakers fully or partly of Irish Catholic background. Next, syntactic features in Australian English. Unfortunately, there are no syntactic features that distinguish standard Australian English from standard British English, or indeed any major non-standard features not also found in Britain. But there are many distinctive words and phrases. However, although Australian English has added some 10,000 items to the language, few have become internationally active.
G'day guys, welcome to this episode of Aussie English. Today I want to talk to you about one simple trick to sound more like an Aussie when you speak English. Let's go. So this one simple trick is words that end with ER, OR, AR, URE, OUR, and A all have the same pronunciation in Australian English, at least the majority of the time. And this is the short sound. So we make this sound by just lowering our jaw quite a way and just literally saying the sound but short. So as opposed to words like bar and car, which have the long A sound, this sound is a very short sound. So let's go through a couple of words for each one of these endings so you can practice sounding more like an Aussie. And I will admit there are exceptions. like everything in English, the rule is that there is always an exception. But the majority of the time, these words are going to end with the sound ah, so it's a good place to start. So words that end with a: area, cobra, coma, flora. Words that end with AR: polar, cheddar, linear, jaguar. Words that end with ER: water, laser, maker, beer. Words that end with RE: center, theatre, tire, fire. Words that end with OR: mirror, actor, alligator, doctor. Words that end with URE: treasure, cure, nature, structure. Words that end with OUR: favour, neighbour, humour, hour. And then as a little bonus here at the end, guys, sometimes words with UR at the end are pronounced as as well. Although a lot of the time they're going to sound like And one example I could think of was amateur. Amateur. So that's it for this episode, guys. I really recommend trying to make these pronunciation changes if you want to sound like an Australian. Otherwise, you're going to have somewhat of an American accent if you're pronouncing that R sound at the ends of words like water, anchor, treasure, neighbor. That is a very American sound with that R sound. In Australian English, we don't curl the tongue up to make the R sound. We drop the jaw and we keep our tongue flat. Neighbor, treasure, hour, actor. Anyway, good luck, guys. Keep at it. Keep improving your Aussie English, and I'll chat to you soon. Peace out. All the best.
According to the Canadian Encyclopedia, the Treaty of Paris of 1763, which ended the 7 Years' War, opened most of eastern Canada to English-speaking settlement. The American Revolution prompted the first large group of English speakers to migrate to Canada. And the Industrial Revolution in Britain, which prompted an even larger group to migrate to Canada in the 19th century, are all important historical events that contributed to the development of Canadian English. In the 17th century, English was first spoken in Canada in seasonal fishing villages along the Atlantic coast. Following the Treaty of Utrecht, which transferred Nova Scotia to Britain, permanent English-speaking towns were formed in the province, including Halifax, which was founded in 1749. The British victory in the 7 Years' War enabled extensive English-speaking settlement of the rest of eastern Canada, following which France lost its remaining Canadian territory to Britain in the Treaty of Paris. Article features in Canadian English. The difference between American and Canadian English is how suffixes are added to words in each language. Canadians prefer double consonants, but Americans prefer single consonants. For example, Canadian will pronounce travel as traveled, but American will say traveled. Canadian English like to use OU in words like humor and behavior, while American English prefer to use ER in phrases like yetre and centre. Modal verbs which Canadian use to simplify, and phrasal verbs and idioms which are used in ordinary speech listening and understanding the pronunciation of grammar words in the flow of speech is critical. For example, give me a copy is impolite and could make people angry. Could you please send me a copy is considerable politer and people are more likely to give what you want. Next, lexical features of Canadian English. According to Charles Babbard, in terms of lexical variants or vocabulary, Canadian English is significantly closer to American English than British English. While there are a few distinct Canadian words, that Canadian English isn't just a hybrid of British and American dialects. Canadianism, such as bachelor apartment, bunk machine, Chesterfield, eavesdrop, grade 1, parquet, runners or running shoes, scribbler, and mushroom are not just words for things that are only or mostly found in Canada, but Canadian words for universal concepts that have other names outside Canada. Compare American studio apartment, ATM, couch, gutters, first grade, parking garage, sneakers or tennis shoes, notebook and restroom, or British studio flat or bed seat, cash dispenser, cité, gutters, first form, car park, trainers, exercise book, and laboratory or loo. Standard Canadian English is likewise far more comparable to Standard American English than to Standard British English in phonological and phonetic parameters. In fact, it has been proven that Standard Canadian and American English are nearly indistinguishable in terms of major phonemic, inventory factor mix, tactic features in Canadian English. The principles for arranging words into phrases, sentences, and paragraphs are known as syntax. We cannot uncover distinctive Canadian patterns of word or text development in this area when compared to British or American English. Unlike in the disciplines of vocabulary or pronunciation, small variances exist between the two varieties. Nevertheless, in such circumstances, the differences conform to the other variety. The morphology and syntax of Canadian English are for all practical purposes identical to that of American English, writes Millard.
So by far the most commonly received comments I get on my videos fall into one of three categories. Something about my hair, something about my mustache, or something about the way I say this word. I say about, most North Americans say about. To figure out why, let's take a fascinating look at the world of Canadian accents. The way I talk is a particularly strong example of what people who study this sort of thing call the Canadian raising phenomenon. This refers to the weird way many Canadians pronounce the ow sound in words like house and down and round and south. Ugh, even sounds annoying to me. The idea is that Canadians have a tendency to raise their tongues in their mouths when they make ow sounds, as I just did right then when I said mouth instead of mouth, which is when you keep your tongue down lower in your mouth. Mouth. Not all Canadians speak with Canadian raising, and certainly most don't do it as much as I do, but it is a pretty common phenomenon, as you can see in this montage of clips of random Canadians talking I've assembled.
Are all very unhappy about this. I am absolutely unhappy about it as well.
Stressed out, but don't worry about it, because here's what's going to happen. We're going to get drunk and eat chicken fingers. Me, you, and the old man is going to be here in about 20 minutes.
A matter of planning, and of course being a mom is all about routine.
Well, think about it. 10 years ago, the price of gold was maybe $300 an ounce.
So you see, some Canadians say it about, some Canadians say it more like a boat, some people say it somewhere in the middle of those two, and of course lots just say it the normal way, about. But what's weird is that I feel a lot of Canadians are very inconsistent about this. I get a lot of teasing from my fellow Canadians because I say about instead of about, but I notice a lot of people say saying route instead of route, and no one seems to care. I blame South Park, which made the whole aboot thing this big funny joke.
The fuss is about taking our citizens. It's about not censoring our art. It's about what's so goddamn funny?
And made life tough for Canadians like me, who now seem very obnoxiously stereotypical. There's more to Canadian accents than just the pronunciation of one word, however. Like any country, Canadian accents vary a great deal depending on class and region. Most Canadians are probably pretty familiar with the sort of stereotypical lower class Canadian accent, which is kinda the sort of twangy, you know, right? There's this Canadian comedy rap group called Bee and Steve, and they make YouTube videos where they sing with this kind of accent, and it's pretty funny, as you can see here.
Before we learn to walk, we can cross-check properly. Just rockin' plaid jackets. Chainsaws, we operate them right. Fucking A-right we do, bud. We cut our weight in firewood.
This is, of course, the same accent that was famously mocked in those Great White North segments of SCTV back in the day.
Oh, so that's our topic for today, the Great White North. So, good day.
What an education, eh?
Now, the most famous regional accent of Canada is the accent of people who live in the far eastern Atlantic provinces of Canada, particularly Newfoundland. This region of Canada was originally settled by a lot of Gaelic-speaking people from Scotland and Ireland, and to this day, their accent still has a sort of Irish twinge to it, as we can see in this montage of Newfoundland people talking.
Let's stay is solid and he's able to incrementally increase. I mean, you could end up with a minority Harper government. You know, that would be the worst possible thing.
If you're looking at crew changes, they depend on moving a crew out of here. Some of those people are 3 and 4 days late.
When I arrived at the airport, there was approximately 3 RCMP cars here. And what they were doing here, I had no idea, but I knew there had to be something up. They weren't out here picking up fares.
If you've seen the movie A Series of Unfortunate Events, you may recognize this as also being the accent that noted Canadian actor Jim Carrey used when he was playing the sea captain guy.
Oh, that there was all my fault. Hey, well, can't tell you how sorry I is for running into your sister there like that.
Newfoundland people also have a habit of using a lot of weird Newfoundland slang, which when coupled with their accent can make them really hard to understand, as satirized in this Nissan commercial.
This here next trail Bonavista. Take a gander at that pen roof, buddy. If that don't put a gust in your spinnaker, I don't know what would. And look at the wheels on her. Got enough alloy in there to fill a bucket.
Now, a lot of French Canadians speak English as their second language, so they obviously have a French accent, but the sort of French accent they have is quite different than the sort of accent French people from France have. In France, people with strong French accents tend to substitute T sounds for Z sounds, so words like this and that and those become zis and zat and zos. In Canada, where French is spoken in a sort of more nasally way, French accents tend to use harder D sounds, so dis and dat and those. See if you can notice the difference.
This description might seem unfair for the previous generation, but keep in mind that I am not really criticizing the people.
We want 4 things in the throne speech. We want to clarify this issue about Afghanistan. It's so important. It's really important for us. The other one is we have a bill.
Of course, in this era of television and the internet, more and more North Americans are starting to lose their regional or class-based accents altogether. Researchers now often speak of standard American English or the general American accent, which is this sort of bland, plain accent you tend to hear from newscasters and actors and anybody else who doesn't want to seem exotic or interesting. As more and more young people are taught to believe that accents are something embarrassing or hickish, you're starting to see entire generations speak exactly the same way. Entire countries, too. Check out this montage of young Canadians and Americans and see if you can tell who comes from which country.
If you really want to get in a company that requires more experience, you have a one-up on everyone else that's applying.
With what they give us in my program in particular, like we don't get any seminars or anything like that. It's all lab and lecture.
And I just try to be as versatile as possible. Whatever the team needs, I try to do it. So if they need me at the 5, I'd like to be in the 5.
I'm in kinesiology, and a lot of kin is mostly memorization, which is what I'm used to and which is what I'm good at.
It was a trick, they're all Canadians. Hard to tell though.
Gordon E. 2022 stated that New Zealand English is considered to have evolved from Australian English, and 2 dialects are strikingly similar. However, just about 7% of New Zealand's early settlers were born in Australia. Therefore, it's improbable that Australia was the primary source of this new dialect. New Zealand English was most likely shaped by settlement patterns, with the dominant group having the most effect. Around 45% of the overseas born in 1881 were from England, with the majority hailing from the south and southeast places in and around London. This may explain why New Zealand English is frequently referred to as a southeastern variant of British English, despite the fact that other dialect areas in the British Isles contributed to the vocabulary. Grammatical features of New Zealand English. Things that are not found in New Zealand English. Agreement. Although there is some equivocation with agreement where the verb to be concerned is, in general, New Zealand English shows standard agreement patterns. Thus, the patterns found in Table 2 do not arise in New Zealand, though they are widely found elsewhere. For example, feature. Northern subject rule. The example is I sing and dances. The standard equivalent is I sing and dance. Another example is invariant auxiliary don't. He don't like me. But the standard equivalent is he doesn't like me. Nouns and noun phrases. Second person plural pronouns. Like many other varieties, New Zealand has a non-standard second person plural form use. There are alternative forms like use guys and you guys. It seems likely that the form use is Irish in origin, although it is also found in parts of Scotland and the north of England. You guys is almost certainly American in origin. Hickey 2004. Plurals with voiced fricatives. The plural forms of roof and wharf in New Zealand are typically roofs and wharves. In contrast to the standard forms in England, the origins of these forms are not clear, given that there is a historical variation in both words, and at least roofs is widespread in non-standard English varieties. Lexical features of New Zealand English. Some changes in lexical meaning in New Zealand English are as follows. Unique meaning of New Zealand English words. The meanings of words in New Zealand English are somewhat different from those in British or American English. The same words often derive new meanings in New Zealand English and have unique meanings which are not found in British English. For example, station used to mean that some of New Zealand's earliest pastures were run by criminals who were monitored, called stations. In addition to the general meaning of British English, private ranches in New Zealand can now be called stations. Do refers to taking care of sheep and feeding them. The phenomenon of synonymous dissimilar words with British English is another feature of New Zealand English that uses words differently from British English to express the same thing. For example, New Zealand has introduced from Australia a small animal called opossum or possum, but New Zealanders in spoken English call it joey more often than not. In Australia, however, only refers to young kangaroos. In British English, the slang term refers to only 3 or 4 pence coins. It can be seen in the term has a special preferential meaning in New Zealand. For some examples are, the dome often worn by all English gentlemen is called bowler hat. In British English, derby hat in American English, and band hat or hard hitter in New Zealand English. Mental hospital is called rat factory, which is also an expression in New Zealand English. Synthetic features of New Zealand English. According to Varancy 2012, as with many language varieties, it is the differences in vocabulary and pronunciation that are first noticed features of NZE, and so it is unsurprising that there had been relatively little research into aspects of its syntax and or morphology. Verbs. In a corpus-based analysis of Hund et al. 2004, report a lower level of regularization of irregular past tense forms such as dreamt, dreamed, or spilled. In NZE and Australian English than in American and British varieties. They describe this as an example of colonial lag affecting the Southern Hemisphere varieties only, and not American English, which is more advanced in this measure than British English. On the other hand, the use of proved instead of irregular past tense participle, proven, was further advanced in New Zealand English than in American English sample. They also observed that gotten as a past participle of get is a recent innovation primarily spoken in New Zealand English and likely result of American English influence. There is thus considerable variation in whether more conservative or more innovative verbs forms are used in New Zealand English. Pronouns. The case marking of personal pronouns in conjoined phrases is variable. For example, the use of or me does not necessarily follow the grammatical rules for this pronoun. So, me can occur in a subject position, me, and Jack will do it, though it is less common than I in object position. Example is they're going to show you and I how to fix it. And as a prepositional object, he'll give it to you and I, which is even quite likely in the speech of those who might be expected to be speakers of more standard variety. Example is politicians, educators, or broadcasters. Where other varieties may use she for machinery, cars, boats, or planes, it has been noted that both New Zealand English and Australian English use this more widely with inanimate objects. Reports overhearing she's a good crush helmet, or she is also found in the phrase she'll be alright, meaning it will be alright.
Our first vowel in the sound series is called the dress vowel. And when I travel overseas, this is definitely the #1 sound from my accent that people make the most jokes about. Here are some examples of it. Yes. Red. Step. Left. Neck. Best. This vowel is usually written as either E or EA, as in pen, 10, 7, or head, bread, red. And because English likes to be crazy and confusing with spelling, there are less common examples as well, such as UE as in guess or guests, A as in any or many, IE as in friend, and AI as in said, and sometimes again. Now the tongue is quite high when we make the dress vowel in New Zealand English, and the lips are quite open. E, E, E. Here are some more examples. My best friend Steph has 10 red dresses. I read the letter from Jeff. 10 men ran up 27 steps. She said it will be 27 degrees tomorrow. Is there any bread left? Now it's your turn. Have a go at pronouncing these. 7. 7. Pen. Pen. Red. Red. Bread. Bread. Again. Again. Letter. Letter. Weather. Weather. Friend. Friend. I slept in the tent for 7 hours. I slept in the tent for 7 hours. She had bread and cheddar cheese for breakfast. She had bread and cheddar cheese for breakfast. My pen is on the desk. My pen is on the desk. I play chess with Greg on Wednesdays. I play chess with Greg on Wednesdays. Nice. Now let's see how this all sounds compared to other varieties of English. Remember how we said that the tongue is high in the mouth for this vowel? Let's have a listen to the dress vowel in an American English accent and a New Zealand English accent. The difference in sounds that you will hear has a lot to do with the fact that my tongue is a lot higher for the New Zealand pronunciation. The lovely American voice you will hear is my fabulous friend Brennan from Colorado, USA. Thanks, Brennan. Here we go. First, the American version.
Red dress. Red dress.
And now the Kiwi version. Red dress. Red dress. Most often the New Zealand dress vowel sounds more like the kit vowel in other varieties of English. Examples of the kit vowel are in words such as ship, chip, sit, and pig. So an everyday example of vowels being confused is that when people ask, "Can I borrow a pen?" in a New Zealand English accent, some people can hear, "Can I borrow a pin?" Another example is from my science teacher in high school, who moved to New Zealand from England. And to her, when New Zealanders said the name Jeff, it sounded more like the cleaning product Jif to her ears. There is also evidence that the tongue is getting even higher for some people when they say the New Zealand dress vowel. And this means, for example, that best sounds more like beast, and bed sounds more like bed. Now these are quite big differences, and they are helpful to remember because if something doesn't quite make sense, it could be because of a difference in vowels like this. So that's New Zealand's lovely dress vowel. Please join us next.
And that concludes our presentation for today. We hope that you have learned something. Thank you and see you again next time.